Architect Joan De Leon Tabinas, who is an architect, sustainability strategist, and a lecturer, a graduate of Master of Science in Integrated Sustainable Design at National University of Singapore. She is the founding director of Center of Resilience Environmental Experts, a firm that promotes ecologically driven design practices while satisfying the human needs in full potential. She is leading the effort of CORE 360 degrees systemic thinking, wherein biodiversity, water, energy, food, public space, and waste woven together to deliver robust, sustainable solutions for the promotion of healthy, inclusive, and resilient environment. For her, sustainability should be holistic, part of the norm rather than a choice. Ladies and gentlemen, the moderator for plenary 3, the chairman of the UAP PDC, please welcome Architect Joan De Leon Tabinas.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to our participants. So we are now here at the plenary number 3, which we will gonna tackle about water, the strategies on water security in buildings. So first, I want to share this with you. One question: what is the issue? What are the issues that we are now partaking on with regards to the water? Water and weather. It's a delicate balance between the evaporation and precipitation. Am I right? This is the primary cycle through which the climate change is felt. As the climate change, our country in particular felt the drought, the heat wave, the floods, the sea level, and the storm intensify, often with severe consequences. And we all know that. We just experienced it weeks ago. Water scarcity and water stress issues have become clear threat to the global population. At any given season, due to this climate change, the reuse and regeneration of water incorporates in building systems should be in our design, in the management during the construction, and the building occupancy as well should be the standard of any building. This is the very reason why we are all here to act as one. We should take ownership in this action. This is not actually all for us, but this is for the betterment of our future. So to bring you in with no further ado, may I introduce to you our leadership speaker to deliver the message, Dr. Floris Bugard. He is a professor, PhD, has over 25 years of experience in research and consultancy in international climate adaptation. His project integrates the worlds of spatial planning and water management with a focus on the implementation of the nature-based solution and sustainability urban drainage system. He's a civil engineer and also a professor of a spatial transformation at the School of Architecture Built Environment. Currently, a consultant, water and subsurface in Deletres in Netherlands, and affiliated in the research of the Global Center of Adaptation. His general research and advanced field includes climate adaptation, stormwater drainage and infiltration, river rehabilitation, complex monitoring, and urban water quality management. Ladies and gentlemen, the CEO of the Innovative Dynamic Monitoring System, nominated as the Engineer of the Year in 2021 and won the National Climate Adaptation Award in 2014. Again, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Floris Bugard.
Salamat, Joan. That's quite an introduction I got there. So thank you so much, and thanks for everyone, of course, to invite us here. So I can share my screen and show you a bit of slides that we prepared. Let me get this out of the way. So I hope you see the full screen, I think. So just to give you some slides as an introduction for this, I might need a bit more of 10 minutes, but it's also an introduction for the panel to reflect on, of course. So what I would like to start with is actually the key messages, so that makes it a bit easier to go through the presentation. Short, because maybe some of you tuned in later. Why are we doing this? Why do we need green infrastructure? And of course, we have challenges, but also the benefits. And of course, we would like to come to action. And for that, I would like to show you, of course, in 10 minutes, very shortly, what kind of building standards you can use or what kind of examples you can visit. So I will leave you with some more information where you can reflect on, but also some discussion points for, of course, this panel. So I'm quite excited to be part of this. Just because Joan already said a lot about my positions, just remember that the different positions are to inflect on a triple helix. So we need, for implementation of green infrastructure, we need education, we need professionals, we need research, of course, and that's the backbone of this presentation. So that's why I have different jobs, so to say. And all these jobs in the Netherlands have one thing in common. If the dikes would break, we live under the sea level, I would be out of my jobs, as you can see here. So water is quite important, relevant for everyone in this case. So as been said by Joan as well, I work at the Global Center of Adaptation, which is mostly a solution broker on climate adaptation. And just to reflect on that, it's a very broad topic. Today we're going to talk about cities and of course infrastructure and water and disasters, but it's much more wider than that. And of course you're well connected as the Philippines all over the world with this, as you can see with some of the pictures of people in the commission in this case. And maybe to reflect, because it was asked to bring some building standards or some inspiration as well. The two offices of the Global Center of Adaptation have a very high BREEAM certificate, for example, the highest, so to say. On the right, you can see a map with more than 2,000 buildings in the Netherlands that have a BREEAM certificate. 77 have an outstanding one. I will come to that later, but of course it's related to water. And on the left, you see a visualization of the office in Rotterdam, what it will be. You can see it's green, but it's also floating. And one of the most resilient aspects of green buildings is if you have drought and you have floodings, if you have floating urbanization, it just goes with the flow, so to say. So that's one thing. But as you know, well, it has to be built. And I'm a civil engineer, and in the picture on the right, you can probably relate to that. First, we have a sketch with great ideas of green infrastructure. Then we meet with the client, and then maybe the ambition is a bit less. And then we have working drawings, and after construction, it might look as a normal building. And I think that is key for today. Let's discuss how we can keep that ambition, how we can keep green infrastructure. But first, why are we doing this? And of course, it's mentioned, and I think you're tuned in for the whole day. It's about heat stress. It's about floodings. It's about water quality. It's about air quality. It's about urbanization, of course, expanding in a rapid movement. And of course, drought. And on the right bottom, you can see that, of course, we get the news from the Netherlands about the last week that you have to witness. And just bear that we are very related to this topic and that we support you from the whole global society, of course. So how can we help? Well, these are smart cities, question mark. What you can see here is a picture, of course, of Manhattan in New York. You see Central Park as one green element in the middle. It's nice, but for heat stress, for example, and drought, we need every drop where it will hit the building needs to be reused, needs to be infiltrating. Because of drought, it has to be used for heat mitigation. So we need a global green infrastructure throughout the city and not centralized in one. And buildings can be a very key element to achieve that. Because if you can see here, green is not getting the space that it needs to have in the city. We seem to seal trees, for example, with asphalt, as you can see here in these pictures. And water is not able to infiltrate in the urban dense area. And these artists, I think, visualized the task, which is forehand of us, how to open up the city for green. And on the right, you see some very green buildings, very small, but very inspirational. So, and of course, we've seen already a lot of examples, and these are great examples, some small, some very big, but the greatest example, just to browse through it, are of course multifunctional buildings. Not having the task only for water, but also, as Joan introduced, more elements like the system diagram and energy on food, also water, of course, and green and public space. And it should have social science, should have education. It should meet a lot of ends. And here again, a lot of examples that I could talk for days about, of course. But I'm just gonna maybe highlight some of them. In the right corner of the bottom is a smart building. It actually holds a lot of water in rainy times to access the drought period. And it's a smart building because it actually listens to the weather forecast. So it holds the water and reuses it when it's needed and releases the water when we can. And maybe the black and white picture, not the best picture, it's in Japan. People canoeing on a roof, which is very inspirational. Of course, it's about art, it's about recreation, etc. So, well, as a bad marriage, let's make a list. Why are we doing this, or why are we not doing this? And of course, there are 101 reasons to do it, like biodiversity, heat stress, and all the challenges that I just explained about. But let's open up, of course, by why not? Of course, there's budget involved. We can do it cost effectively. There are a lot of examples for that. Sometimes there's no space in the urban dense areas to implement them. There could be a lack of legislation. That's why we talk about standards, for example. And it could be something that you just don't like it. It's aesthetic as well. But I'm going to show you some examples, and I really hope, and I think most of you will like it. But of course, this is for the discussion later on. So we're talking about the benefits, and we can calculate what the benefits are. And if we talk about cost, you can see if you put the benefits to cost or benefits, of course, then it will be cheaper actually, because you raise a lot of issues and fight a lot of challenges. So there could be spawn cities, resilient cities, and those are very important words, because standards where we're looking for are related to spawn cities or resilient cities. So, and I'm not going to go into this because these are really specific types of sustainable urban drainage system that you can use. And of course, it has been by the previous speaker, if I can say, Sir Dinky, very well put why we need this. So I'm going to skip this for the sake of time, of course. So what is very important as well is doubt is the origin of wisdom. So we have to test them, because in every country, it's going to be different why we implement green infrastructure and also how it functions. And one of those research things that we have to do in a triple helix settings is climate cafe. And we did some in the Philippines and basically all around the world. So what do is basically test green buildings. What is the effect on heat? How does it retain water so we can reuse it, for example? And that's one of the things that I would propose to cooperate on together. And of course, there's a lot of science involved. I'm going to skip this because if you're really involved in this, I put some reference to some publications I did on spawn cities and resilient cities. And what is the main part of that is that we come up with local specific guidelines, standards. And this is a table of a lot of countries, as the Netherlands, Germany, United Kingdom, and Belgium, which is very, very in the near neighborhood. But they all have different standards. And that's, of course, the message. Don't copy things from Europe or the United States to the Philippines, because there are different reasons. For example, we don't have a lot of malaria. So if you retain water, that could be induced, of course. And there's a lot of information that we can use because some standards are, of course, international. So that's one message that I would like to give. But the most message that I would like to present is to be inspired. And one of my hobbies, which might be a bit weird, I go to different green buildings and I map them. just for knowledge international exchange. So these buildings on the right, you probably are familiar with. That's in Milan. It's the Bosco Verticale, so the vertical forge. It's in the most introductions of green infrastructure conferences. It's being used. But how do we find these inspiration? How can we find the information about the standards, etc.? So one of the platforms, international platforms, is climatescan.org. You might have heard of it, but there are even more in the last week, more green buildings being uploaded, probably related to this conference. So there you can find Bosco Verticale in Milano, for example. So it's quite easy to go. You get the exact location, photos and videos, and of course, more research documents as the standards that I've been talking about. And what I think surprising of that is that the Bosco Verticale is being copied, which is a great compliment all around the world. So it's in Singapore, it's in Vietnam, it's in Berlin. So that's quite nice to just visit, and especially in COVID time, just from your desk, go around the world and visit those. And you will find buildings that are food production buildings. For example, here in Sweden, where everybody in this building is actually forced to grow vegetables. And of course, they do that with a lot of attention and motivation, but it's quite nice to see. Or water quality is not being addressed enough. And of course, in the Philippines, being there several times, this is a major issue. Some buildings are being made for water purification, as you can see in this. Wetlands on a roof, for example. So that could be quite inspirational. And of course, in the Netherlands, there are about 1,000 green buildings already, not only with the BREEAM certificate, but all around the world. And these buildings, these have a very high percentage of green walls, are from a municipality. Or the next one is from a water authority, being public organizations giving the good example to others. And that would be very nice to kickstart on as well. So last but not least, I will, of course, these are individual projects, but we need to have a bigger scale. So what can we do, for example, in Manila? Can we learn from cities as Rotterdam, being one of the 100 resilient cities? And just to brush on this, and this is more things that Rick Heikoop is working on, being from Rotterdam, so he can reflect on the discussion with that. So this is a case study. Rotterdam is a specific element that is being bombed in the war, so you would have a lot of space to rebuild. And that's a chance, of course, to rebuild in a very green way. And there's so many different green buildings and characterizations of that. So there's green buildings, blue roofs. So that's about water, that's about green, but also other colors that relate to more social science or field labs as being addressed earlier on. So the city of Rotterdam has a lot of examples with different meanings. So multifunctional reasons to implement a green strategy in the world. I'm just showing this because I think my time is up, but Rick can reflect on that more. Last but not least, of course, there's a lot of information. This is just 10 minutes, of course. I and also other parties of the EU or the Global Center would like to offer a cooperation that maybe the Climate Cafe that I talked earlier on, and we can discuss more during the discussions, that maybe we should find buildings in the Philippines because there are already green buildings, and let's highlight them. Put them on the stage, let's research them and come to standards that are really specific for the Philippines in this case, or other countries, because we saw in the previous speakers as Venezuela or Bali and Indonesia, great examples. So I'm not going to repeat the key messages, but I hope you are inspired. I hope we can put action on the list and we can cooperate together. And of course, this presentation will be presented to you. It has a lot of references that you can look for more info as Climate Scan. So I hope this gives a bit of an introduction, Joan, to the rest of the discussion. And of course, here's a slide with much more info. So salamat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Flory. So for my takeaway with regards to the topic that you've told us is sustainability should be holistic. We really can't feel the effect of being sustainable or being green if you're just on the center, or if your design is only centralized. So it should be holistic. There's a what do you call that one? There should be a dumbbell approach between sustainability and what are the designs and system approach that you need to incorporate in every designs that you are doing. So it's not only about the building standing alone. It should be one community that should be dressed or woven to each other so that it create a good community of green. And also one more thing that I've learned as well is the standard. Okay, we shouldn't copy from other country. We have our own culture. We have our own ways on how are we going to do it. And we need to understand what are the resources that we have in our country. And there's a lot. Okay, so for the reaction about that, I would like to call on first from the DPWH. Okay, so we have here Mr. Alterejos Magalang. So he's the senior public official who has been working with the national government agency as an environmental management expert since 1982. He's the chief environmental management specialist presently assigned at the Climate Change Service of the Department of Environmental and Natural Resources, or DENR. At the United Nations, he is the regular member of the Philippine delegation who participates as a negotiator and facilitator in climate change talks as a country party to the UN Framework Convention or climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Alberto Magalang of DENR.
Okay, thank you so much, Architect Juan, for that kind introduction. So I would like to, this afternoon I'm going to share with you the statement from Secretary Simatu, who won't be able to join us this afternoon because, as we all know, he has been appointed by the President to head the task force on the Build Back Better concerns. So actually, all of us will be also be engaged in this new task force as staff giving technical assistance that would provide also technical expertise according to what we know. I mean, talking about myself, I'll be doing some climate change in related engagements in the task force. So Secretary Simato's intervention would be short and sweet. As we all know, in the past, in the previous sessions, there were a lot of messages that were already shared by our speakers, especially in the regenerative built environment system session. So the Secretary would only like to emphasize some of the messages that were mentioned. And but before that, first and foremost, the DNR would like to congratulate the Climate Change Commission and the United Nations Development Program through the Indigenous Support Project for the Philippines. And of course, in collaboration with the Green Architecture Advocacy Philippines, the United Architects of the Philippines, UAP, and the Green and Restorative Actions and Sustainable Solutions for organizing this web conference on the development of the Philippine standards for climate smart buildings with the theme towards a climate-built environment for the Philippines. Climate smart built environment for the Philippines. Okay, the problem of water scarcity is already felt in many areas of the country at certain seasons. As we all know, we have now four seasons in the Philippines, based on the report from Pag-asa. So this problem is aggravated by the deterioration of water quality due to the pollution from untreated domestic sewage, industrial wastewater, agricultural and urban runoffs. So climate change has exacerbated these water problems and its adverse effects, which are expected to get worse if robust adaptive measures are not instituted in communities, households, and buildings. So in light of climate change, the DNR recognizes the significance of a comprehensive review and subsequent restructuring of the entire water sector governance as embodied in the National Climate Change Action Plan. As further articulated in the NCCAP, or the National Climate Change Action Plan, the DNR likewise considers the importance of the assessment of the resilience of major water resources and infrastructures. So next is the management of supply and demand, management of water quality, and the promotion of water conservation. Further, the DNR supports the implementation of green building principles in community development through the development of green building rating scheme, specifications and criteria, and incentive system for green buildings, as also espoused in the National Climate Change Action Plan. Okay, specifically for the DNR, some additional thoughts on climate smart building, in addition to what have already been mentioned, especially by architect Dinky, and also as mentioned by Dr. Bugard. The DNR considers a climate smart building that should incorporate water conservation technologies and strategies. So there are here are some of those water saving strategies that we can consider, such as utilizing water efficient plumbing fixtures, like for example the application of ultra low flow toilets and urinals, waterless urinals, low flow and sensored sinks, and low flow shower heads. Also, and as an example, there should be a good design for dual plumbing to use recycled water, and also the collection of rainwater using the rainwater and gray water storage, and the design of low demand landscaping using plants native to the local ecosystem. So these are just a few of the examples which would be serve as an additional strategies that have been mentioned previously in the other presentations. Okay, talking about the department's program on clean water. There are priority activities that would include the monitoring of the compliance by industries and firms, including buildings, classification of water bodies, and the designation of water quality management areas, or the so-called WACMAS. So this has already been started within the areas of Manila Bay. It's still based on the order from the president to work on the rehabilitation of Manila Bay. And then talking about the water quality or the clean water program, basically we all priority activities on this are focused on the improvement of water quality of priority rivers as well outside Metro Manila, and other critical water bodies, including lakes and bays, through continuous massive cleanup, monitoring of industries, and rehabilitation of esteros, rivers through partnerships. And this would include application of ecosystem or nature-based solutions like constructed wetlands, as already mentioned a while ago. So the classification of water bodies will still be done by the department through the Environmental Management Bureau, because this would give us or help water managers and planners develop proper water quality management programs and provide the standards to protect aquatic life and the specific use of water bodies. So in closing, the DNR would likewise support the development of a national standard on climate smart buildings that would not only reduce environmental impacts, reduce or avoid greenhouse gas emissions, conserve resources, and also The standards would ensure that our buildings would be more resilient to climate-related risks. So with that, thank you very much. And together with the green building sector, let us build back better. Thanks so much, and magandang hapon po.
Thank you very much, Mr. Magalang. And we really believe that the DENR is really doing all your best to support whatever we have here on board. And then we are so grateful to know that you are reviewing and taking action on the plans of our natural water resources. And to add on to that as well, we are so happy to hear that we are now incorporating some systems in the water management system, such as the gray water recycling, the rainwater harvesting, what else? The natural stormwater treatment, and also the we can also use the non-potable water self-sufficiency as well. You may want to think about that, and some connectivity and accessibility over the water. So thank you so much for that, sir. And then now, with no further ado, may I call on our first reactor on the talk of Dr. Floris Bugard, and also the response of from the response of Mr. Alberto Magalang. So right now we have a reactor from Netherlands as well. He is the senior lecturer of water management of Rotterdam University of Applied Sciences. He is also have 15 years of record and achievement and demonstrated success in initiating, managing, and leading international collaborations and partnership in water sector in the triple helix setup. He was involved in the development of the courses of water management and real estate management, and co-initiated the wetskills.com in 2010. He is currently working in the two of his passion, Sunny Embarkment Philippines, which integrates the Helophyte filter system in the river embankment to provide sanitation facilities along river banks in Davao City, and CityScan method, which aims to gather essential data that enable to access the level of resilience of the specific street, neighborhood, or city with low cost and low tech tools and instruments, with the aim to create awareness and formulate concrete action to make resilient city, which were organized in Manila, Cebu City, and Rotterdam. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I will give the floor to Mr. Eric Hiccup.
Good afternoon, everybody. I would first like to thank the organizers of the meeting for inviting me here today. Thank you especially Architect Joan Tabinas for a nice introduction. Now, for those of you who don't know me already, my name is Rick Heikoop and I'm a full-time lecturer of water management at Rotterdam University. And I worked for more than 15 years in the built environment and water sector. Like Mr. Magalang from DENR just mentioned, water scarcity is a great problem in the Philippines, but that's strange because there is an abundance of precipitation in the country. So we should find strategies to capture the precipitation and use that water that is the rainfall in the Philippines. Now, talking about water management challenges, let me first introduce briefly the challenges of my home city and how we overcome these. And then I come to my reaction and on the standards. Well, I live in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, and it's a flood-prone country located in the delta of 3 European rivers. 25% of the Netherlands is located below the sea level. In fact, Rotterdam is one of the lowest parts of the country, with the lowest point at 6.7 meters below the sea level, and we are still sinking. So that means that every drop of rain that is falling in this area needs to be collected in a surface drainage system, and numerous pumping stations bring it to the higher level. Eventually, this is discharged in a river a few kilometers away. Space for water retention in our low-lying built environments like Manila, like Rotterdam, and delta cities is of very important. And the city of Rotterdam recently has adopted a roofscape program to add water retention in the city. I come to this in a moment. So land subsidence is a problem in the Netherlands, but also in Manila. In a recent study of DOST in 2011, Metro Manila is sinking up to 4.5 centimeters a year due to groundwater extraction, which is strange because there is an abundance of rainfall, annual rainfall. We observe the same trend of sinking cities in Cebu City and other cities in the Philippines and in fact all over the world. Sinking cities are a serious risk. We should better manage our water resources, reuse our resources, and install rainwater harvesting, which was already mentioned by the previous speaker. We should install that in our built environment so that groundwater extraction is not necessary. In that way, the built environment system stays functional during changing climate change conditions. Now, if we look back at the presentation of the previous speakers this morning and the speaker of Dr. Floris Bogart, so there are 3 points I would like to make. The first point is that we should see our city and our buildings as an enormous sponge. The built environment can function as an enormous sponge. We harvest the rainwater during periods of rainfall, and the water is released during periods of drought. We should open the soils of our cities and allow the water to infiltrate in the soil. Similarly, we should also use our roofs for water retention. We have seen examples in the presentation of Dr. Floris of water storage on rooftops. Green roofs, blue roofs have many advantages. They can retain the water, reduce the pressure on the drainage system, and reduce the heat stress in the city. Imagine how Philippine cities would look like if you could use the full potential of the roofscapes in those cities. If all the roofscapes were used for water retention, greenery, and leisure. I think this is possible, and you see those trends in other cities all over the world. So I think Manila should, and other cities in the Philippines should adopt that policy. So if we talk about building standards, I would suggest standards about water retention on the top of buildings or below the building or on the premises around the buildings. I think that's very important that we change our built environment to create a sponge city that is both very useful for water retention .
I think there's something wrong with Rick's connection.
Yeah. Yes, architect. I think we should proceed with the next reactor.
Yeah, okay. So again, we are encouraging you to put your questions on our chat group. And as much as we can, we will able to answer all those. Actually, Dr. Floris Bogart already answering some of those. Thank you very much, Dr. Floris. So we will now move on to our next reactor. Okay. So for our next reactor, we have here the chair of the Philippine Water Partnership Corporate Affairs Director, or CAR Hill Philippines. He is Mr. Christopher A. Ilagan. And in this capacity, he provides strategic leadership in the company's corporate communication, government relations, corporate responsibility, sustainable development, and branding practice area. He is a member of the company's senior leadership team. Because of his work in the local water space, Mr. Chris has strong personal advocacy on water sustainability and governance. He is currently the chairperson-elect of the Philippine Water Partnership, a non-governmental organization dedicated to the advancement of integrated water resource management and continues to be involved in the various policy dialogues geared towards the improving of the management of water resources in the country. He also serves as the vice chairman of the Movement of Water Security, a local private sector-led movement advocating for the more sustainable management and development of the country water resources. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chris Ilagan.
Thank you, Joanne. Really an honor and privilege to be here. Yes, I do wear multiple hats, but today I wear the Philippine Water Partnership chairman hat, as well as the vice chair for the Movement for Water Security. I'll maybe just give a brief background of the two organizations. First, Philippine Water Partnership, we're a multi-sectoral NGO dedicated to the advocacy of integrated water resource management. And for those of you, I would imagine most of you would know that, but for those of you that don't, let me give you the official definition here. It's a process which promotes the coordinated development and management of water, land, and related resources in order to maximize the resultant economic and social welfare in an equitable manner without compromising the sustainability of vital ecosystems. So I think it's very apt for me to be speaking in this forum with you today. We are also the Philippine Water Partnership is also the official civil society organization representative of the NEDA Infracom Subcommittee on Water Resources. As vice chair of the Movement for Water Security, this is really it's a private sector grouping largely concerned about the seasonal supply and demand gaps that we have more frequently experienced in the past years, and more and more I think we're going to be including among our advocacies the other side, right, where we have too much water in some times of the year. That having been said, it was said in the earlier plenary that water might be a national issue, but it does require local response. And that's because water is governed by natural physics, and it operates at the level of river basins, whose boundaries do not necessarily overlap with our administrative and political boundaries. And I think that has always been an issue in the water sector, especially insofar as governance is concerned. Oftentimes, LGUs will look at water from the lens of their LGU alone without realizing that their water source may be from an adjacent LGU or may be shared with another LGU. And if we do not take a more integrated approach to managing these limited water resources, oftentimes you will find conflict when it comes to these uses. And that's precisely what IWRM, or Integrated Water Resource Management, offers as a management framework on how to manage our scarce resources. Some fast facts about the water sector here, and this probably explains why it's largely fragmented. We have 30 plus government agencies trying to manage our water resources, right? And oftentimes it's the overlap of functions, a lack of coordination between the various uses and users of water, why we find ourselves often, despite having as much water as we should have, oftentimes not having enough or too much of it at certain times of the year. Other fast facts around the sector would include, our goal towards achieving universal access to safe drinking water and sanitation. We're still quite a ways away, right? If by 2030 that is the aspiration, today we're only at 87% access to water. We only have 90% access to toilets, and that doesn't mean that the used water there is being properly treated. No, we only have 44% of the total Philippine population with pipe water access. The rest either relying on communal faucets or individual wells, right? And in terms of the uses of water here, agriculture takes about 70%. Industry another 20%, and municipal domestic around 10%. Those are just kind of some fast facts to give you a sense of the water situation in the country. Now, I'm trying to bring it into the context of our discussions today, right? And ideally, all built up our built up environment, so those that you are directly involved in as architects, is one that's aligned based on science,
takes into account the local natural environment and hydrology as well. And I'm glad to note that in the previous plenary, that is well understood. It's normally an issue of how you localize this concept, no, of really trying to work with nature, no, and rather than trying to overcome it, right? Take on a sort of judo approach to it and work with it. And so I like the solutions that have been discussed throughout the day today. Probably some things that come to mind where the built up environment can also play a role. We know that supply demand is always the issue here. And on the side of water supply, this is rather water demand, right? And water efficiency, supply self-efficiency. Some ideas that I'm glad to have noted earlier in the discussions, and that I hope you continue pushing in your particular profession, would be in the areas of water efficiency in the fit outs and the plumbing of the various buildings that you do. The water efficiency that you build into those new buildings will be of latest technologies, right? We do want quality plumbing. Interestingly enough, a lot of the water that we lose in our systems today is due to a very a deteriorated pipeline system across our various cities, right? And I would imagine that within the context of buildings, right, especially older ones, that becomes a very quick way. Well, it's not quick, of course. The plumbing is within the building, but finding ways to ensure that the buildings that we build are good for 50 years, that the plumbing or longer, that the plumbing is of adequate quality, so as not to be losing the valuable resource of water over the years to come. We also have, the idea, I think it was discussed earlier, around reuse, double reticulation systems. Imagine we are using, I'm not sure what the percentage is, and hopefully our next speaker can give us a sense, but for non-potable uses of water, we're probably using a whole lot more of the water from our taps for those purposes. Laundry, cleaning the dishes, flushing our toilets. And you imagine that's the amount of money it takes to actually get that potable water to you. I think we do need to start finding ways of reusing this valuable asset, and maybe not having to have a full-blown water treatment facility in your buildings, but good enough so that we can use them for uses or requirements that require lesser quality of water. Of course, this might not be directly related to you, but the way we have now mandatory energy ratings on our various appliances, I would hope that a similar rule would happen for water using devices as well. Of course, we have the likes of wastewater treatment facilities that I hope both the nature-based type and perhaps the more the unnatural based type are certainly things that we need to make sure are properly constructed in our various sites, because we all know that this water, this used water, ends up in our system. If we can't reuse it, let's just make sure at least we're bringing it back to a quality that our wastewater treatment facilities can actually handle. All right, and of course, something close to the heart, particularly of the movement for water security, is around rainwater harvesting, right? And the catchments and the storage. I believe Rick was trying to get to that as well, right? In the Philippines, only 4% of the water, of the rainwater that falls, is captured by households and industry alike. In India, that number is 60%. And so I believe that there is a long way that we can potentially go in so far as creating basically a new water source for us. No, and in Metro Manila, we know that we have to start building dams just to meet the projected demand moving forward. I think there were discussions a bit earlier about concerns there, but water catchment can certainly, water catchment alongside water efficiency measures can go a long way in maybe requiring such a large water dam that we also know comes with environmental impacts, right? Perhaps at that, I mean, I do have some more to speak of, but if we have time, I can probably get to that. But back to you, Joanne. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm muted. I don't know. Well, anyway, as I've said, thank you so much, Mr. Ilagan. And then we all believe that water is very important in our focus of learnings for today. But don't you ever forget that, as said, okay, 70% of our, what do you call that now? Agriculture, okay, we're getting it from water. So what is the main fact here is if we will engage the water and the green policy together. It is not only that looking at the landscape, only landscape alone, but as said of from our speakers a while ago as well, that we are now looking at landscape as producing food. And this landscape also can able to help to filter the rainwater or the storm water runoff. It's not only about beautification or having green in our environment, but this landscape can also help us. How are we going to filter the storm water runoff, which is really, we are having a lot of problem regarding that. Okay, so for the last response that we have here Engineer Patrick Dison. He is the Division Manager in Engineering and Technology Operations Group of Metropolitan Water Works and Sewerage System. He involves in the present as Division Manager for the Angat Ipo Dam Operation Management of the Metropolitan, yes, the MWSS, which is responsible for the management of existing water resources, and also implementation of the infrastructure project related to water source management, watershed management, and facility improvement projects in Umiray River, Angat Dam, and Ipo Dam, and managing facility studies for the development of the new and existing water resources. Again, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear from Engineer Patrick Dizon.
Hi, Joanne. Thank you for introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting the FWSS for this Green Forum. Again, my name is Patrick James Tison. I'm one of the division manager of MWSS and working in water industry for 10 years already. And I am speaking in behalf of our Deputy Administrator, Bobby Cleophas. So I just have a little of reaction and maybe additional inputs in water security program in the Philippines, specifically here in the Metro Manila. So to begin with, to have a water secure, not just in the building, but for the whole Metro Manila and the nearby provinces like Bulacan, Rizal, and Cavite, the demand projection shall be properly established. So this demand projection, one of the factors that we are considering is not just the population per se, but also the future development of a certain area. So as of now, the commercial establishments are now increasing. Although in customer base, the number of customers in the residential areas are the highest. But most of the times, those who are living in the residential areas are in the commercial establishments. So, but of course, it changed now during this pandemic because we were mandated to stay at home. So this is the reason why our concessionaires are constantly coordinating to the LGUs, and we keep on asking them if the comprehensive land use plan and the zoning plan is updated. This is where we are able to project the water demand of a certain area. So bringing in the concept of the building, ang nangyayari kasi minsan, like, kung kailan nandyan na yung project ay saka lang nakikoordinate sa Maynilad, Manila Water, or iba pang water utility companies. So ang effect, yung nilatag na mga pipelines sa area ay hindi na kayang i-supply yung supply requirement ng building or nung the whole area mismo. So yes, believe it or not, it really happens. So the important key here is that I would like to emphasize the importance of not just coordination, but also a proper planning before the implementation. And I also just wanted to highlight the challenges that the water industries experience during this time of pandemic. So before the onset of the COVID-19, water companies have programs for the water development. So they have programmed to construct water structures such as yung mga treatment plants, water reservoir, pump installation, and so forth. However, the activities were stopped due to this pandemic. So the main reason is the limited number of workers that are allowed to go outside, and the effect is that they have the delays on the construction schedule. So additional to that, one of the challenges in the bigger picture naman in water is that yes, the Philippines is rich in water. However, this is not evenly distributed. So there's a report that was prepared by the National Water Resources Board. It says here that the Philippines is one of the countries blessed with abundance of natural resources, but it tends to be available in the wrong place, in the wrong time, and of course, in the wrong quality. So one of the best examples here is, of course, lalayo pa ba tayo here in Metro Manila. So 90% of a water source of Metro Manila came from the Region 3 and the Region 4. That's in Rizal and the Quezon province. Dito nanggagaling yung water from the Umiray River and General Nakar, Quezon, Angat Dam, and of course the Ipo Dam. So the remaining 9 to 10% of water came from the Laguna Lake and the deep wells. But as of now, yung the groundwater are no longer used in a long-term use because it was no longer allowed by the NWRB due to the land subsidence here in Metro Manila. But in the provinces, mostly they're still using groundwater as their source. So ang nangyayari, kung kailan kailangan natin ng tubig dito sa Metro Manila, yung ulan naman nasa Visayas or Mindanao. And when we have rains naman dito sa Metro Manila or sa Region 3 or Region 4, we have issues naman with the water quality or the turbidity. So do you think how will we be able to address that one? So one of the indicators of the Sustainable Development Goals, number 6 under the item 6.5, is the implementation of the Integrated Water Resources Management, or the IWRM. It was mentioned a while ago by Chris already. So the aim of this IWRM is to have a sustainable water security. So however, mostly we're experiencing right now are the challenges of the development of new water sources. We should admit, and of course this is obvious already, that the development of the water sources is not an instant. So meaning, in order for us to construct dams, reservoirs, and treatment plants, it will entail time. So mostly minimum of 3 to 5 years in the maximum, and it depends on the capacity, and also that's not includes pa yung mga problems na experience with the contractors and the proponent during the implementation. And aside from that, majority of the projects that the government is implementing right now have bottlenecks. So you heard it right. Even the government projects have also bottlenecks during construction. Actually, not just before the start of construction, even during the implementation, and even during the operation stage. So we are happy in the water industries right now here in the Philippines that the government is very supportive on the water infrastructure project in terms of water security. So when you say water security kasi, you should be thinking for a long-term initiative. So yes, we are surrounded by water, specifically salt water. Actually, it is now being proposed by our concessionaires, Manila Din Manila Water, but treating them will entail a burden to the low-income communities because yung mga investment na gagamitin nila sa pag-construct ng mga water treatment plants na yon will be charged to the water tariff. So the balancing, it is really a challenge for the MWSS. So as I mentioned a while ago, for the support that we are getting from the government, 9 out of 100 equivalent, which is equivalent to 141 billion of investment project of the NEDA's infrastructure flagship projects, or yung tinatawag nating Build program ni Presidente Duterte, are for the water infrastructure that is for the domestic supply and irrigation. So 77 billion of that 141 billion is for the MWSS. So that is for the water supply of the Metro Manila. So these projects include the 6.4-kilometer tunnel construction from Ipu Dam to the Big Tisitling Basin in Norsagaray, Bulacan. So the purpose of this project is to increase yung conveyance capacity ng mga existing tunnels and aqueduct system namin. So it was already completed last August 2020, and it's being operated right now. And the second is the aqueduct number 7. So that's around 3.6 meter of diameter na steel pipeline, and the length of that pipeline is 16 kilometers. So the purpose of this aqueducts number 7 project is to replace yung mga existing aqueducts 1 and 2 namin, which was constructed 1930s pa. And lastly, the project that was included in the flagship project ni President Duterte is the new Centennial Water Source, or yung Kaliwadam project. That is located in Rizal and the Quezon province. So while the remaining 64 billion dun sa 141 billion is for NIA naman. So wherein different capacities of dams will be constructed all around the Philippines. And in support, again, by the President Duterte through Executive Secretary Salvador Medaldea, they issued this Administrative Order number 32 to fast-track yung implementation ng water projects that I have mentioned a while ago. And by the way, when I am watching yung news 2 days ago about the impact ng Typhoon Ulysses in the Philippines, I heard this Congressman Romeo Momo. He's the technical working group chairman on the House Committee on the Public Works and Highways. So he highlighted the importance of the proposed Building Act of 2020. So they are lobbying right now in the Congress, wherein they are proposing, and I quote, that all buildings should be responsive to the changing times like typhoon, to ensure yung safe and livable, and I like this one, environmental friendly structure. So vis-a-vis yung natural man-made calamities and the Philippines are now facing right now. So as a young engineer and the future water leaders, it is important to us that these laws and guidelines shall be updated, kasi kami naman yung mga magbe-benefit din sa mga ginagawang batas na ito. So that's it. That's what I can share to this forum. That if we don't want to happen again yung water shortage last year here in Metro Manila, and even to the other places in the Philippines, I think we need to do our part also in water conservation. So let's do everything we can to conserve water that we have right now, so the future generations like me can still enjoy yung water in the future. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Engineer Dixon. And we heard you, and we understand the challenge of the agency of the government that experiencing with regards to planning this project of having dams, this system, so on and so forth. But also here, this is the very main reason why we are all here in this event, because we are trying to collect the ideas on how are we going to make a policy or guidelines for the climate smart building, which is one of the vision of that is, of course, how every building will be a self-sufficient, especially in the water. Philippines creating or having ample of waters. We don't know what is the meaning of enough in terms of water. So having this and creating this 100% of non-potable self-sufficient water is a very good effect already in our environment. If each of our building will already create this kind of system or embrace this kind of system, I think there will be a very big effect on the community. Okay, so now we are opening our floor for the Q&A. Actually, we already have one question here from architect Echeverry Janis. So please turn on your mic if you want to answer or reply on this. First is, how will a climate smart building deal with the shortage of water and overflow of water? We have El Nino and La Nina in a country or in a year. So how are we going to solve that if we are talking about the guidelines of this climate smart building? Anyone wants to answer it?
Shall I give a short response?
Okay, sure, please.
Yeah, leading to the other ones, of course, because I would really like the others to respond as well. But I think climate adaptive buildings, one of them I showed in the presentation is a smart building. So it actually reacts on weather forecast. So of course, weather forecasting is more accurate now, so we can really retain water in a dry period. And of course, when a wet period comes, it can release the water. So smart buildings could be very smart, but of course it contributes with retaining water or reusing water, which in precipitation, and of course discharging water and store water in flood periods. So it can really be a sponge, in a sponge city, so to say. So that would be my response. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Flores. Anyone from the team or part of the plenary wants to answer? Okay, now we will move on to, so is it clear? The question been answered? Okay, thank you so much. All right, now let's move on to the next question. This one is from Architect Ega, and directing to the speaker of the DENR. Why does DENR declares as alienable and disposable land within watersheds and floodplains? Shouldn't these areas be kept as no-build zone?
Yes, thank you so much, Architect Joan, for conveying that question. Actually, I've already typed in my response to the question, emphasizing that these watersheds and floodplains are actually non-alienable and disposable land. So in fact, you cannot really build something on it. Pero there is a caveat on that, unless there is a law that authorizes the conversion of these areas into something else. I mean, in terms of land use. So there should be a law that would reclassify this watershed, these areas into build-up zones or build zones.
Thank you so much, sir. It's really important to have these policymakers to sit on board with us to reply on this as well. Okay, so for the last question from Architect Richard Martin Rinen, dams are, of course, flood control structures, but the Filipinos now see otherwise because of the issues on water release during the last typhoons. So how will you able to convince the people that dams are actually helping control floods? Anyone? How are we going to convince the people now because of what happened last time, right? So I don't know if it is really timely that they release the water from the dam, but unfortunately it cost us a lot of problems. So how we as Filipinos, maybe I can ask from MWSS, how are you going to convince now people that dam is very important to us and it is helpful, not will cost, or it is helpful in terms of the flood control, not will cause them danger? How about Engineer Dixon? Do you have any word about this one? Is he still around? Or anyone in the group of plenary? How do you think we can able to convince the people?
Sorry, I got disconnected. What is the question?
Okay, thank you, sir. So again, I think this one is for you because we talked about dam a while ago. So this one, this question came from architect Richard Martin Rinen. Dams are, of course, flood control structures, and we all know that. But for the people now see otherwise because of the issues on the water release during the last typhoons. How will you convince the people that the dams are actually helping control floods?
All right. Actually, the releases that we have conducted for the past typhoon is mitigating measures in order for our dams to maintain its structural stability. So actually, it's a protocol for the dams already. So we have this protocol which was signed by the OCD, Pag-asa, NAPOCOR, and all of the stakeholders of this dam. So it's the releases is not just the MWSS who decided to release the water, but also it's also a collaborative a discussion between these stakeholders in order for these dams be able to withstand the increase of the inflows from the watershed.
Thank you so much, sir.
Answered the question. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. So meaning to say public awareness is very much important. I will take this input from our audience according to Mr. Alexander Villoria. Dam release is important to prevent dam breaks. Okay, works on dam safely program in national government. The key is the information dissemination to public. We should create dam safely agency to guide them. And okay, I think that's all for the plenary 3, and I hope you guys could able to dig into the topic that we have tackled. And aside from what we tackled, because a while ago I've heard about the ROI, or the return on investment, isn't it? Because people nowadays, when we talk about green, is a plus cost in every building or development. Yes, agreed that the development will incur extra cost and will directly bore, example, by the developer, but the taxpayer will benefit a lot, and the government will save huge amount of money once the project have been implemented, believe it or not. So therefore, the government should provide programs that would favor more interest among the developers and the investors. That is my takeaway as a sustainable strategist as well, and an architect. So again, we all have this, and we should always take part in this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Architect Joan Tabinas, for moderating this last plenary session. We'd like to present the people involved in this plenary for their participation. A certificate of appreciation is hereby presented to Dr. Floris Bogaert of the Research Center for Built Environment in the Netherlands for delivering the leadership message for the 17th Green Forum of the Green Architecture Advocacy Philippines on the web conference on the development of Philippine standards for climate smart buildings with the theme Towards a Climate Smart Built Environment for the Philippines, held on November 23, 2020, signed by Secretary Manny de Guzman of CCC, Architect Maria Luisa Daya Garcia of Green Architecture Advocacy Philippines, and architect Renato Hiray, National President of United Architects of the Philippines. Also to be presented with certificates are Mr. Albert Magalang of the DNR, Mr. Rick Heikoop of the Rotterdam University of Applied Sciences, Mr. Chris Ilagan of the Philippine Water Partnership Corporate Affairs, Philippine Water Partnership, and Engineer Patrick Dizon of the MWSS, and of course, our moderator, Architect John De Leon Tabinas. Thank you very much for your participation in this plenary session.